Well, things are getting better some places and worse in others, and continuing in the normal range in Iraq, of course. 683 people of our army forces have now died over there, and the rate of attacks has gone up in the last 3 days. There have been multiple 4, 5, 6 major car bombs and or suicide attacks throughout the area, not simply in Baghdad, meaning that our relocated troops to Baghdad are being sorely missed in places like Tikrit and the Anbar, the Anbar province. You know what they call it over there now? Al-Qaedastan. What else is going on? President Bush is headed, in fact, he's at the United Nations having croissants and cafe latte, I presume, with Jacque Chirac, the president of France, this morning. That's on his meeting schedule. He'll be meeting with a number of other international leaders, primarily Security Council members and things of that nature, still trying to work on getting some sort of action out of the UN on the question of Iran. The president will have his 15 minutes of addressing the General Assembly in the opening ceremonies this morning. Later this afternoon, Mr. Ahmadinejad of Iran will be there to pick up his end of whatever discussion is started on by the president's speech. It ought to be a rather interesting exchange. Being billed as a big deal, debate-esque confrontation. One of the United Nations really is pushing the limit, man. The president has been invited to the same luncheon as Mr. Ahmadinejad, and the question of whether they'll be seated and where on the table should be rather interesting. But it moves on as the United Nations comes slowly into gear to creep forward on a number of different issues, one of which is, interestingly enough, the accomplishment of the Israeli troops in pulling out of Lebanon by this weekend. Hezbollah is still in place but not carrying guns in public. They are working heavily on the reconstruction, which is progressing nicely in those villages, and building a political base for Hezbollah that will probably pay off in future elections. The United Nations forces moving in with the Lebanese army to take control of those villages. French and Lebanese forces primarily. A few folks from Italy have already arrived. Apparently China is ready to send some 2,000 troops if necessary. It ought to make an interesting little place to be serving these things. When you're not getting shot at. Lebanon is a wonderfully beautiful mountain and seaside country. Nice duty if you can catch it. The Pentagon is raising the planning activity level for a war with Iran. That word is leaking out of our military. There is always a plan, just in case Argentina decides to attack America. We've got a plan on what we're going to do about it. And so that's contingency planning, but apparently there has been a ramping up of activity in updating the intelligence locational reports on the nuclear sites, etc., in Iran. All of this in possible preparation and leverage on the diplomatic front, which opens again, as I say, today at the United Nations. Nothing new on the spinach front. Everybody is trying to figure out how it is that it's happening. Reports so far that the organic farmers do not have the problem would seem to indicate that we're looking at some sort of additive or fertilizer laid on the ground and then seepage through that. On the other hand, where did that additive and fertilizer come from, and how come it wasn't old enough that it was no longer a threat? Questions. Obviously, the answer is grow your own damn spinach in a box outside your kitchen window. And that's enough news for now. I'm Travis T. Hipp on the radio on a Tuesday. Stay tuned.